Okay, the Hangout is live on air. Hi, my name is Rich Harrington. I am the publisher of Phototofocus, and I've pulled together a collection of our writers today. We're actually reminiscing just a little bit about photography. And one of the things that I always find interesting, since all of our writing team comes from different points in their photography career, some of them are just getting started, some of them are well entrenched, and some came to photography early in life, others came later. I'm always interested what people's first cameras were and what that did as a memory to them, what that first camera unlocked. So I'll kick things off, and then we'll work our way down the line here and just catch up with everyone. And when you do get a chance to talk, feel free to tell people a little bit about your love of photography or what you do. So my name is Rich Harrington. I work professionally as both a video creator and a photographer, and I also am a photo educator. And my first camera that I received very early on was Kodak 110, I believe. It was a very small, compact camera, and I actually got it from, of all things, selling candy bars as part of a school fundraiser. I think I was probably in the fourth grade. And my mom is a very passionate photographer. She loves always capturing the family's memories and everything else. And now I was a part of that process. And so when we would have vacations or family get-togethers, I started capturing those memories. And I think the thing that I remember most, besides that delayed gratification of getting photos back or the rolling of the dice, because as a kid, I got to tell you, like sometimes it would be 2 to 3 months between shooting the pictures and getting them developed. I'd have to save up the money to get them developed, and so there was that very long delay between making the picture and seeing the picture. But I just remember hacking that camera, taking the flash cubes, firing them off with a screwdriver, and taking that camera apart, putting it back together. And I guess that's sort of always been where I've started with photography, which is making of images and understanding the underlying part. All right, so I'm just going to jump down the line and start with Eric, actually. So Eric, tell us a little bit about how you got into photography and maybe your first camera, if you can remember it.
Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm here in the UK. I'm a teacher and a trainer, more on Photoshop than photography, which I had half the skills that the rest of you guys did. My first camera was a hand-me-down of a hand-me-down, which was a box Brownie, and it was in very poor condition. You had to hold it tight, otherwise it might fall apart. But I remember before I even took a photograph, I was allowed to play with it, and I'd take it around and put it on a tripod just to have a look through. And I was making pictures in my head long before I was putting them on film, strangely enough. And then I went on to a little Instamatic, and I could just take as many as I liked, but it was expensive back then, wasn't it? And so now I teach and train, like I say, in Photoshop, but I came to it via video.
Excellent. And that camera, as you look back at it, how long was it until you outgrew that camera or until you stepped up to something else?
Well, it still sits in my loft. I don't think I've outgrown it, and I hope I never will. I want to put film in it and give it another go. It's strange. I seem to have gone full circle. I don't know about you guys, where I kind of started to reminisce and want to go and get those old cameras back out again. And I still, when I take a film camera out, I don't know about you guys again, but I tend to look at the back when I've taken a photograph, and I find that quite frustrating now.
Very true, very true. Well, actually, I'm going to go from memory here, and I know, Kevin Ames, that you recently actually talked about Brownie cameras in an article that you wrote. I'm not sure, was this your very first camera as well? I know that you told me a story once that you started your photography career, I believe, before you were even a teenager.
Yeah, that's true, Rich. 12 years old. For Christmas, I got a Brownie Starmite, and it was a little 127 camera that shot black and well, it shot square pictures, black and white or color, and you could get slide film for it. And I went on a field trip to the Idaho State Historical Society, their museum in Boise, with my friends from Emmett, and I took pictures of them. And I got them back and got them processed and put them up on a poster board, and the kids bought them at 10 cents a piece. I was absolutely amazed. So that was kind of the beginning. But my very first camera that I bought, I got to tell you this story. I worked, my father was an orchardist, so we raised cherries, prunes, peaches, and apples. And I worked all summer long to save the money for my first camera. And I ordered it, and it was a Mamiya C33, which was a twin lens reflex camera. And I took delivery on it July 20th, 1969. That was a Sunday. And I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember, but that was the day that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. So that camera has huge memories for me.
Do you still have it?
Well, I traded it for a Bessler 4x5 enlarger, and I was walking through Sammy's one day in LA, and there was, I swear it was the same camera because it had the same lens and everything on it. I got it with a 105mm lens. The standard was 80. So I bought it for $125, so I still have one.
Good.
So, yeah.
And we're going to go with that. It's actually yours. Excellent.
You see, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, one of our next writers is Levi Sim. And Levi, I know that your professional photography career was a second career for you. What brought you to photography? Was it an early childhood love, or was it a late in life discovery?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I loved photography in high school. I took a backpacking trip with the Boy Scouts, and somehow in the back of my mind, I knew that my dad had an SLR in the attic, and I asked him to borrow it, and the light meter didn't work. It was a Yashica, I think it was like an FR2 or something like that, and he bought it in the 70s in France when he lived there, and he let me use this for this backpacking trip on Mount of the Holy Cross in Colorado, and I put some black and white film in it, and he said, kind of put it on f8 and see what happens. And so I saw what happens, and here we are. I loved it in high school, and I ended up getting a Ricoh KR5 Super 2, which is kind of it was basically a K1000, but with the Ricoh name on it instead of a Pentax name. And using that in high school, and then my older brother convinced me you couldn't make a living as a photographer. And so I didn't take any pictures after high school for 12 years. And then in 2009, the same brother says, you know, Dad's making some money at portraiture, surely you could. And then I quit my job a year and a half later after that, and have been a full-time photographer and teacher for almost 5 years. So.
Very cool. I find it interesting that so many of you had early childhood exposures to photography, and in many ways it ignited a passion that carried into your professional career, but sometimes things got in the way of that along the way. Now,
right.
Mark, you are a professional photographer as well. Do you remember your very first camera, whether it was a loan or one that you actually picked up yourself?
Yeah, for this trip, for this backpacking trip, the very first one that I borrowed, it was a full manual SLR 35mm, and then the one that I bought for my own self, similar, that I started high school with, was this Ricoh model, also a 35mm, and it came with I think it was probably a 28 to 80 zoom lens. It was not very fast, and I have no idea what I learned in high school, but I learned it all again when I started shooting digitally. With a D90 was my first digital camera, and there was that 12 years in between. So I mean, I could really say that a D90 was my first camera as well.
Very cool. How about for you, Mark Morrow? What stands out? Make sure your mic's unmuted too, if you would.
Yes, very good. The first camera for me was I don't remember the nomenclature on the camera, but it was a Kodak instant camera. I bought it for $50 at the corner drugstore in Henderson, Kentucky, right across the street from my grandmother's house one day after my birthday, and my dad sent me some cash to get a camera, and he's always been an amateur enthusiast photographer all of my life, and I've inherited a lot of his cameras, such as the one that I have right here, this OM2S Olympus, and that's the one that I really spent most of my time with as when I got older, learning how to work the controls, or even shooting with it for years without learning how to use the controls at all. It was quite an eye-opening experience to actually learn how to use the thing. But the Kodak camera was so fun. It was, Kevin, very expensive, or Eric, very expensive to buy the film. My mom wasn't real pleased about that. I would just run through the 10-pack of film like that, and back to the store we go to spend more money on film, and then that same process right all over again with processing and developing film and getting back tons of black images and gray images and blown out images, and it's just been an incredible experience to work through. And now with digital photography being what it is, obviously it's not necessarily any easier, but it is cheaper as far as practicing and being able to hone in skills on the craft. So I worked through a few cameras along the way, but basically this Olympus OM2 has carried me through for the most part.
Very cool, and it's interesting. You held up that Olympus, which was your original camera, and it's kind of funny that some of the digital ones, I have some digital Olympus cameras, how much they're making them look like the old ones.
They
Mark,
look just like it. There? Yes, yeah, totally. They look just like it. I would love to have one of those. The what is the OM 5? What is it now? What is the Olympus? I can't remember.
5 looks just like that.
Yes, correct. It's identical. I give hats off to them for that. It's a very sleek, attractive camera. This particular one has an auto winder on it. Everybody remembers the auto winder, and I used to love the sound of that thing, rewinding my film. And I don't know, just good stuff, man. Good stuff. Analog. It is interesting to think that all you needed was a battery to take a photograph. Now everything is dependent on electricity. All you needed was a battery in a dark room, and you could really create some amazing work. So it's come a long way, and obviously I'm not complaining. The digital darkroom known as Photoshop is quite capable, and I've certainly grown to appreciate it over the years, and learned a lot about these things right here at Photofocus long before you guys graciously invited me to come and write. So I've been a
Very cool. We just started to lose you there a little bit, Mark, at the very end, but it is awesome that for many of you, you've taken your love and also share that with other folks. Now, Mikey, you are, I'm going to slightly pick on you. You're the youngest one here, so I'm deeply curious if your first camera was film or digital. It's so strange to us because you've heard some of the balding ones of us here, or the soon-to-be balding ones of us here, talk about, oh, it was so frustrating. We had to wait so long for film, and we had to, pay all this money to see our results. And many in your generation are flocking back to film with this incredible nostalgia. Where did you start, digital or film?
That's actually a really good question. My earliest recollections for my personal development of photography was right before digital, and it came with a Canon ELPH II, the Advantex drop-in load film, APS-C. So I started off with film. I ended up progressing into digital right after that with a Canon ELPH, the digital ELPH. It was a 3.2 megapixel camera. It cost stupid amounts of money. I do remember it being the same thing with same size as my film ELPH, and I carried that along with me for a long time. So that was kind of my basis one. And then I started getting more in depth with it with my dad's Canon FTD with an FD mount on a Canon, and then it progressed later on to a Canon Rebel, which was an XTI later in 2008. So I had my whole spectrum laid out for me through Canon.
And what did this early exposure do for you? What, as you made this migration, as you started your photography career, it was right at that crux of incredibly fast innovation. Did you see technology impacting your approach, or what was the transition for you that said, you know what, I'm going to do this professionally?
Oh yeah, it definitely had a huge impact. I was a really young student. I enjoyed photography. I just didn't have money to really sit there and develop, or the time to really get rolls of film developed all the time. The introduction of digital photography really made it easy for me because I'm a computer techie. I loved having things on my computer, sharing it all out. So once I got digital files, it just made sense for me to just kind of throw it onto a computer, and without the limitation of costs for film or the turnaround for development, it made things just blossom in my mind. And then once I learned about the digital darkroom, it helped out a whole lot. I did take foundations in terms of like film photography and how to do the the darkroom, and my love for film still exists today through and because of that. And I apply a lot of those same techniques, the mindset in terms of developing, shooting, composition stuff from the film days, and apply it to my digital days now.
Very cool, very cool, and that's an interesting journey. Pamela, you're up next, and if you're wondering why Pamela's face doesn't move on this, she's on a lower bandwidth, so Google Voice has dropped her to just a picture, which is great. Pamela, what is the first camera that you remember using, either as a child or a teenager? What brought you into photography? What was the piece of gear that first made you enjoy photography?
I remember specifically, actually, the picture that I took that really did it for me. It was in Alaska, and I borrowed my parents' film Canon camera. I don't even know what camera it was, and I remember taking it out, and my mom was so supportive. She was driving me around to locations in Alaska, and I see this moose in a lake just eating away, and I'm taking pictures of this moose and getting those pictures back. And I knew then that it was something I loved to do, but it got put on back burner because I was on my way to being a professional athlete, and it wasn't until my marriage was ending that I bought a gray market Nikon D40 and started taking pictures of my kids. And from there, I entered school. Once I declared my major as photography, my parents called me up and they're like, "Well, about time." So it was good, and I loved being in school because we worked in the darkroom a lot. So I was able to actually get that same Canon camera and take black and white pictures of it and develop in the darkroom and develop those skills, learning the manual way, I guess you should say. And it was. Yeah, it's gone from there. It's been amazing journey.
Very cool, very cool. And I find it interesting that for many of you, the first camera you started on is the same camera you're actually still at the same model, same brands in many cases. I think we form early connections, and photographers are creatures of habit. Speaking of creatures of habit, our last person here, Mr. Benelli, you actually joined us earlier for an audio podcast, and you're now joining us here on this video hangout. Remember your very first camera? Check your mic. I believe you're on mute.
Yep, all set. All set. Yeah, and it's ironic that we were talking about this because I love going down the trip of memory lane, and my very first camera was when I was on the karate circuit competing, was a Canon. And I did not know you could change lenses on it. I had no idea. So there we were on the karate circuit, and we didn't have a lot of photographers around us, so we just started taking pictures of ourselves. And what I ended up doing was I'd go to the store, and they would say, hey, could you do me a favor? What would be the best, absolute best film to use for sports action? And they would give me 800 ISO, and I would just put that in, and that's all I would shoot with. So, and I knew nothing about cameras. And then when I retired from the karate circuit, that's when a lot of professional photographers saw I had a passion for photography, and then they brought me in, and that's where I just really clung to it.
Very cool, very cool. Well, you've all shared some great stories, and I truly appreciate you guys just reminiscing back on that first camera. The overarching theme that I've picked up here is it doesn't matter when you came into photography or even what your first piece of equipment is. You all use that as a building block to both take something you love, and in all of your guys' cases, I truly appreciate the fact that you share that passion and also write about it and teach and join us over at Phototofocus. So truly appreciate you guys actually sharing that passion with others. And if you want to learn more from this great group, you guys can actually head over to Photofocus and check out their articles. And of course, you saw their names. You can find them on social media and see their photography. But I think the takeaway here, guys, for those of you watching, it doesn't matter what gear you have when you get started. It just matters that you embrace it and that you keep pushing yourself until you hit that wall. And then, of course, if it is an option, it never hurts. We all like our gears and toys. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for Photofocus. My name's Rich Harrington.